Hi everyone, thanks for joining me again for another edition of our masterclass on mapping and interpretation. The last time we talked, we gave some sort of elementary procedures and regulations and interpretations of what we're looking for when we're reading a contour map. We also talked about how important it is. It's such a great aid in our fishing today. And now, thanks to apps like Navionics and some of the others that are out there, just with a touch of your finger, you can pull up a contour map. And still today, most fishermen aren't using them because they really don't know how to read them. They don't know how to interpret them. But yet, it's such a terrific tool in eliminating a lot of that unproductive water out there before we launch our boat. It's something that we need to learn how to use. So we talked about what we're looking for. First, what it gives us, which is deep water and channels. It shows us structure, and it shows us, if we're looking real closely, it shows us break lines. And we talked about the deeper ones that we like the best, and all of that we talked about last time we met. But today I want to give you a little challenge as to how to interpret some of the things that we're seeing. Once we take a look at a map and we see some things, I want to challenge you a little bit today, actually give you a little test. And we're going to use some diagrams. And we're going to start with this first diagram of a large bar. As you can see it, it's a large, really a big bar reaching out into the lake. And the dotted line around that bar, there's a couple of contour lines, but the dotted line on that bar designates a break line. And we have three potential contact points, what we call contact points. Contact point is where the fish first make contact with a structure. And it's important that we know that because many times the fish will hit the contact point, they won't move any further. And if we know where that spot is and we're sitting there casting, we can limit out. So identifying a contact point is important. So in this little bit of testing and a little bit of teasing you a little bit, get your mind working, we're using this bar that you're seeing in that diagram, and I'm going to ask you a set of questions. As you're looking from the shoreline out, on the left-hand side of the bar, we see a sharper break occurring. And right at that sharper break, there's also another break there, a bush. And then as you go out to the end of the bar, we see a weed line, a nice group of weeds out there at the end of the bar. And then if you come over to the right side of the bar, you see a bunch of rocks leading up to a pier. And then sitting off to the right of the bar, you see a hump. Now my question is, let's say you got this spot on your map, you're looking at it. The question is that I'm going to ask you today. If we have a couple of fishermen sitting on these three spots, we have a couple of guys at the pier, we have a couple of guys out there at the end of the bar, and we have a couple of guys over there at the sharper break. Which guy has the best chance of catching a fish? I'm going to let you look at it a minute. Once you study it, take a look. I love this. You know, Buck used to do that to me all the time. We go out on a real lake, we'd find a spot and we'd do a detailed map of it and say, okay, where to fish. So it'd always be putting me to the test. So today I'm putting you to the test. For those of you who've been with me in the past, and maybe you already know the answers to these, just bear with me on this because we have to get this out of the way. I really want to make a point here in this entire little video. I want to make a point that we got to always be using our head. We got to be able to interpret what we see. It's one thing to be able to see it. It's one thing for Navionics to say, here, take a look. What do you think? Well, then we have to be able to interpret it. So you've had enough time now. You've got your answer, and I can't ask you, and you can't tell me, but I'm going to give you the answer. In this particular question, nobody had a chance to catch a fish. And as Buck would say, tricked you. But I didn't mean to trick you. I meant to make a point. Take another close look at that map. Nobody caught a fish because this structure doesn't lead anywhere. It just leads to a flat. There's nothing out there. Nobody could catch a fish because fish don't know that bar exists. Like I said, you can have structure and no fish. You just can't have fish without structure. In this case, in this particular scenario we just threw at you, nobody can catch a fish on that bar. It's no good. Doesn't lead. Remember we said the first thing that must occur when you're interpreting a structure, does it lead all the way from the shallows to the deep? If it doesn't, it won't produce. So let's move on to the second little question I have. I'm using the same bar, only I'm changing a little bit here, as you can see. We've got a deep water hole. If it's a natural lake, let's call it a natural lake. We've got a big deep water hole that sort of funnels down and comes right up to the end of the bar. Now I'm going to ask you this question. In this scenario, who has the chance to catch a fish? Who has the best chance? That's almost too easy. I mean, you definitely would answer the end of the bar. I hope you would. I mean, that's like, you know, it's just like a highway leading you right into town. I mean, there it is. So the guy at the end of the bar has the best chance. But how about the guy sitting down there 200 yards away or 100 yards away at that sharper break? It's a big bar. Does that guy have a chance to catch fish? Think about it for a minute. Look at it before I give you the answer. Okay, that's enough time. Yeah, he could catch fish under good weather conditions. The fish will hit the end of the bar, but under good weather conditions, they can move up that break line to that sharper break, and you could be sitting, that guy sitting there casting around that bush, could catch a couple of fish, sure, under good weather and water conditions, because that's pretty shallow over there. Okay, now, how about the guy at the pier? Could he ever catch a fish is all I want to know. I want you to think about that for a minute. Okay, I can hear your minds working out there. Question is, as your brain is clicking, how about the guy on the pier? No chance to catch a fish. Why not? You're thinking, well, he hit the end of the bar. Why can't he move along that bar and get to down there to the rocks and the pier? If you will notice, the end of the bar breaking off at 12 feet. The same break line over on the right side of that bar by those rocks and that pier is breaking at 14 feet. And if you remember our study on structure, when we talked about deltas and we talked about humps, remember we brought out a very basic movement of fish that you cannot ever forget. Fish will never go downhill to get shallower. It makes no sense to them. Instinctively, it makes no sense to a fish to go downhill to get shallower. When they're going downhill, they come up on a structure. When they're going downhill, they're going back home. But they wouldn't come up on structure and hit 12 feet and go down to 14 feet to get up on that pier. They just won't do it. So the guy at the pier, he's dead. He's absolutely dead. He cannot catch a fish. How about the guy sitting out on that hump? Have a chance to catch a fish? I hope you get that one right. No chance. That hump's sitting out there in the flat. There's no way those fish ever going to get to that hump. Now, so as we look at this scenario, the structure will produce, under good weather of course, it's going to produce, but it'll produce at the end of the bar. Occasionally you get fish up to that sharper break, but you'd never get one if you're sitting down there at those rocks fishing your can off. You're not going to ever catch fish. There'll never be a fish there. And there'll never be a fish out on the hump in that scenario. Okay, so here we got diagram number 3. Same bar, same depth, same situation, all of that, except now we have a deep water hole that feeds right to that sharper break. Now, question is, could you ever catch a fish at the pier? No. Could you ever catch one at the hump? No. I'm giving you the answer before we start. Now the question comes up, who's got the best chance? Sharper break? You're going to say sharper break, I know you are. So let's just say it. Sharper break has the best chance. How about the end of the bar? Could he ever catch a fish in this scenario? No, he can't. Because the end of the bar is breaking at 12 feet. Sharper break is at 9 feet. They come up and hit that sharper break. They're already at 9 feet. They will not go downhill to get shallower. It makes no sense to the fish. Basic fishing fact. But you see how it changes everything? An average fisherman can look at that bar and go up there and say, man, this is great. I got the end of the bar. I got the pier down there. I got rock piles down there. I've got sharper break over here. Man, this is great. Well, the pier will never catch a fish. The hump will never catch a fish. The end of the bar will never be a fish. And the sharper break is occurring at 9 feet. Could you ever catch a fish? The answer is yes. But how often? Hardly ever. So in real fishing, if you saw that map, if you saw what we're looking at right there, how much time would you spend fishing this bar? You might identify the sharper breaks the spot, but how long would you spend fishing that? You wouldn't spend much time at all. You'd have to have perfect weather to get a fish up there. It's too shallow. When they do move and they get that shallow, that's where they'd be. So you identified it, but still, in real fishing, you wouldn't spend hardly any time there at all. It's too shallow. Remember I said, when you're looking at that map, I want to find stuff breaking between 12 and 20, Buck says. I say between 15 and 20. I prefer it 17 to 20. But at least 12 to 20. This is breaking at 9 feet. Too shallow. Okay, now, here's our last diagram. Now I got you thinking now. I'm not sure you know which way to go yet, but I've got you thinking. And folks, really, this is 101 stuff here. This is really pretty easy stuff. But before we can move on to the more difficult interpretations and things, we've got to get this. So, under this new diagram we're looking at, we've got 3 deep water holes. We've got one over there at the sharper break, and it's such a large bar, could qualify as the deepest water in the area, but either way, we got some deep water right there. We got 2 other deep water holes out here. One comes real close to that hump out there. And it really feeds in close to the guy at the pier. Finally, he's going to get some action. But I want you to really examine this situation. And get your mind working now. And I'm going to ask you 2 questions. First, we got 2 fishermen sitting out on the hump. Did they ever have a chance to catch a fish? That's the first question. And then, even though we can see how that one deep water hole, the deepest water in the lake right there, feeds right up to the rocks and the pier and all of that, to that 14-foot break, we know that that's going to be a contact point for sure. So my second question is, would you fish the whole bar? Would you just fish at the pier and the rocks? Would you fish the hump? Those are my 2 questions. Would you fish the whole bar or not? And would you fish the hump? Now, that's a lot to think about, so I'm going to let you think for a minute. I can hear you thinking out there. This is sort of like a game show. I should be playing some music in here or something till you come up with the answers. Okay. First, let's deal with the 2 guys sitting in the boat out there at the hump. Do they have a chance to catch a fish? They have a chance depending. If they can reach that deep water hole with a long caster, see there's a little space there, I'm not sure. Let's assume they can reach the hole. They've got a chance to catch a fish under bad weather and water conditions. Because the hump itself will not qualify as a migration route. You probably forgot. Maybe you didn't. I hope you didn't. And what's the qualification of a migration route? It must lead from the shallows. The hump is 15 feet on top. That's not the shallows. It's not a migration route. But they could maybe catch a fish along that base of that deep water right there, casting from that hump under bad weather. They might catch a fish or 2. It's possible. But it's not a migration route. Okay, so we get to question number 2 now. We know, you could just look at that and know instantly, the way that deep water feeds into that finger there at 14 feet on the right-hand side of that bar, that's the contact point. There's no question about it. But the question that I asked you was, I know you can see that, but would you fish the whole bar or would you concentrate right there at the contact point? And I gave you a chance to think about that one. And let's ask it to you this way. Would the guy at the end of the bar out there, Would he ever have a chance to catch a fish under this scenario? Answer is yes. Because the fish hit at 14 feet, but the end of the bar is 12 feet, so they could be following that break line up right on up to 12 feet. The guy sitting out there at the weed bed at 12 feet, he could catch fish. Catch some fish in them weeds even. You bet. How about the sharper break? Could he ever catch a fish? Answer, yes. But again, the weather would have to be near perfect to get those fish moving from the 12 feet on up to the 9 feet, where they would pause and eventually stop. So it would have to be great weather. But the answer to the question is, would you fish the whole bar? Answer, yes. Did we identify the contact point? Just from what we've seen in this little drawing. Yeah, we did. The end of the bar, the finger of the bar at 14 feet. And we answered the question about the hump out there because that hump's a dead end. Maybe. Fan casting off that hump down there in the deep water in the sanctuary zone, they might catch fish. But it's not a migration route. So we answered a bunch of questions. We haven't even been out there on the water yet, and we've answered all those questions. So that was a good lesson for you, I hope. And the whole point of all of that was, once we see something on a map, we've got to be able to interpret it. And how we interpret things is by being grounded in the knowledge. Fish won't go downhill. That's too shallow for good movements. That's a dead end hump. And just on and on. It doesn't lead all the way. All those things that we've already learned. But sometimes you get out there on the water, or even before you launch your boat, when you're starting to look at a contour map, you forget about the basics. They forget what they've learned. They've sat through it. They've listened. They've shook their head. Yeah, oh yeah. That makes sense. I get it. They go out in the water and they go about their fishing in a completely weird kind of way. Like they never heard it in the first place. So, as we're examining this before we get on the water, look at our maps. We've got to interpret what we're seeing, because we don't want to spend time doing a detail map out there on the lake on a structure that won't produce. I don't want to spend time on a structure that won't produce. Sometimes in a good detail map, I might spend a half hour. But before I spend that half hour, I got to know that structure will produce. It's breaking good. It's got a good break lines. It breaks good. It's a final drop off. It breaks into deep water. I got all those answers before I make my detailed maps. And then when we go out on that lake, we have to do a detailed map to establish where the contact point is, so we can then go about our fishing in a proper way. And I'm looking forward to it, because as I said before when we started this area of study, this is the separation point. This is where you separate the really good ones from just the average fisherman. This will separate you from the rest of the fishing world once you learn these lessons, and it'll never fail you. You know, the fish have been doing the same thing for 2,000 years. They haven't changed. Everybody looked at me when I started back on doing these videos and said, man, we didn't even know you were still alive. Oh man, but all of your stuff, or they look at Buck Perry and say, oh, that's all old news and that. No, there's nothing old about it. Fish have never changed. They've always been the same way. Just nobody really knew what they did and how they operated until Buck Perry came along. He completely revolutionized our sport. And if you know what he knew, and he shared it with the fishing world, if you know all of that, your fishing life will change, I promise you. But we have to do a little bit of work. We got to continue this area study and get really good at our mapping and interpretation. And our success will skyrocket. It'll just go through the roof once we get to that point. I know it did for me, and I know it will for you too. So thanks for being with me today. I want you to follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Do not miss any of our discussions on map and interpretation. It's going to make a big difference in your fishing. So until the next time, we'll see you.